Welcome in, everybody. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined by our college basketball expert, Tanner McGrath, and we are talking the Maui Invitational. This year, it has moved from Maui to the main island of Oahu, playing on the University of Hawaii's campus due to the wildfires that raged in August. But in terms of a bright spot for this matchup coming off of that tragedy, this is arguably the most star-studded Maui Invitational of all time. There's going to be 5 teams ranked in the AP Top 15, and in addition to that, we have the Chaminade Silver Swords rattling their sabers here in an odd numbered year. For those of you not in the know, they only play in this tournament on Hawaiian soil on odd number years. They draw Kansas in the first round. So what we're going to do here is we're going to give you our picks to win the Maui Invitational, as well as some teams that present value to maybe win 1, 2, or go all the way and win all 3 and go through the winner's bracket here. So we'll start with the bracket itself. We have the very first game of the day at 2:30 p.m. on Monday. That's Tennessee taking on Syracuse, followed by Purdue against Gonzaga, Kansas against Chaminade, and then UCLA Marquette in the nightcap. All right, so Tanner, I'm going to kick it to you first. Who drew your interest in terms of winning this thing outright?
So I talk about it all the time in our articles, Breeze, our column, weekly column, the pick and roll. Returning production is monumental in early season college basketball handicapping. The teams with more continuity are going to beat the teams with less in November and December, with some exceptions, but that's generally my rule. And here comes Marquette. My pick to win this thing at 5-1. I think it's great value at 5-1, first of all. Look, they returned 4 starters from a team that swept the Big East regular season conference championship titles last year. They only lost Omax, that essentially replaced his production with 6-man David Joplin. The big part about them is the Tyler Kolek, Oso Ighodaro pick and roll with the Cam Jones spot up ability makes Marquette's offense impossible to stop. They can touch paint to perimeter better than maybe any college offense I've ever seen. And they're going to do exactly what they did last year, especially in the early season, because they have this same team. They've already beaten a Rider team that I think is a sleeper in the Metro Atlantic by 20. They beat Illinois on the road. Cam Jones is playing better than ever, averaging 20 points a game. Like, he's still shooting 48% from 3, but he's also shown like some flash on the inside, some better athleticism, scoring 7 paint points per game to add to his long balls. And again, you're just going to get Kolek to Ighodaro to Cam around and around the horn until they get an open shot. So I think they can outscore anybody, and their path, I think, is favorable. So they get UCLA first. And I think you like UCLA here, but they're replacing 4 double-digit scorers and David Singleton from last year's team. This is basically an entirely new team from Mick Cronin. They're slated to start 2 freshmen, and their 6th man is a freshman. They lost, 4. They have 4 new starters, and they're going to be heavily reliant on Adam Bona for leadership. I mean, he only scored 8 points per game last season. Like I always say, more continuity beats less continuity in the early season. The big one for this ticket to have value, the big guy they have to down is Kansas in the second round because they're going to beat Chaminade. But I have a few concerns about Kansas. I think they're a tad overvalued. I think this team is getting a lot of love in the market. Look, they weren't able to cover 7 against Kentucky in the Champions Classic. I thought that line was super out of whack. I thought it was way too high. They have a spectacular group of perimeter talent, and grabbing Hunter Dickinson in the portal was, talk about a move. I think there's some questions about this group that nobody really wants to ask or answer. Who's going to step up alongside DeJuan Harris at guard? Do you know how hard it's going to be to replace Jalen Wilson and Grady Dick's 35 points per game last year? They're entrusting that to Towson transfer Nick Timberlake and freshman Elmarco Jackson. I'm also really curious about the shooting on this squad, especially without Dick, who really saved them at times last year. Like, if he wasn't hitting threes in the half court, their offense sometimes stalled very easily. And right now, if you start Jackson at the 2, which they're doing, you've got your 2 best perimeter shooters at the point with Harris and at center with Dickinson. And when you want to run ball screens with those 2, who's going to spot up from the perimeter? I mean, spacing could become a huge issue, and generating consistent offense could too. Second, with regard to this matchup, look, Bill Self is the best ball screen coverage prep and adjustment coach ever. But Kansas's pick and roll defensive numbers weren't spectacular last year. Synergy's number had them, Division I average. Shot quality's numbers had them slightly above average. And you're going up against the best P&R duo in the high majors. Third thing about this matchup, Shaka Smart, and this is why I really like Marquette here. Shaka Smart as an underdog is money. 84, 56, and 3 against the spread all time as an underdog. 65, 43, and 3 against the spread as a road or neutral dog. He's a consistent 60% bet as an underdog every time. 57 and 86 straight up, but if you bet the money line in every single one of those games, you'd be up 14% ROI. If Marquette can, I think they'll beat UCLA if they can take down an overvalued Kansas team. They're right through the championship. We can hedge there, but I think they can outscore anybody in the field. So I like Marquette here.
Just one follow-up question there. Watching Hunter Dickinson just absolutely embarrass the Kitty Cats on the low block, a 2020 game. How do you see them handling him from a defensive rotation standpoint?
Oh boy. That's a big question because, Marquette's not that big on the interior. My hope is that the shots aren't falling for Kansas. And if that's the case, you're going to clog that interior. And I think that's going to pose problems for Hunter. I think it did a bit at Michigan last year. Like when shots weren't falling, you could really kind of come down on him. And either way, I mean, I expect Marquette to win this with their offense. Like they can outscore anybody. I think they can outscore Kansas, especially if Kansas shots are not falling.
I'm going to go ahead to the other side of the bracket for my pick to win this thing. I'm going to go with Purdue plus 340. They're number 2 in the nation. I still think they're undervalued because the memory for most casual bettors is them losing to Fairleigh Dickinson as a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. But already this Purdue team looks a little bit different to me. Just visually, right away, you're going to notice Edey is a little bit slimmed down, the returning National Player of the Year. He's more agile on defense. I think that's going to allow him to play more minutes and to be more impactful, not just as a rim protector, but also stepping out and helping defensively. But the real reason I'm interested here is that Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith look a little bit more aggressive in the early going. They were 2 freshmen that were integral to the Boilermakers last year. And when they went cold, they just didn't have the offensive mix to be able to survive those nights when Edey wasn't absolutely dominating. Particularly Braden Smith. I want to focus in on him for a second. He's hit double digits in all 3 games this year already, 8.3 assists per game, and he's shooting 50% from 3. Obviously, 50% from longer range isn't sustainable, but I like the aggression. And it's not just, looking for his own shot. They're also picking up the tempo a little bit. It's breaking no news. Purdue's been a slow, plodding Big Ten team for years under Matt Painter. They were buried deep in the 340s in terms of pace last year, but already halfway through this year, they've been comfortable playing a little bit faster. Now they're in the 150s. And I think that's what's going to be required to win a tournament like this, particularly opening with Gonzaga, with Kansas looming in a potential championship match between the number 1 and number 2 team in the AP poll. You're going to have to be comfortable playing in the 70s and 80s. And early on this season, I know it's a small sample size. I feel like they're playing a little bit different. They're playing inspired basketball. So to be able to get them at plus 340, I think there's value on the number 2 team in the country. I want to throw this to you in terms of just a quick gut check on my play here.
Yeah, I mean, talking again about returning production, a big thing about getting back guys for college basketball teams, you only get 4 or 5 years of eligibility. These kids grow so much year over year. And so for Purdue to get both their freshman backcourt from last year back, who knows how much, just how much better they're going to look year over year. I like Purdue a lot. I like how they're picking up the tempo. I mean, I don't like them to win this because I don't really like backing Matt Painter ever. But it is true that Purdue is a team to watch out for in the national championship picture this year, just because of how improved that backcourt could be with Edey.
I also think it's favorable in terms of the opening draw. Obviously, Kansas having a de facto bye through Division II Chaminade is in the best position. But looking at Gonzaga, I think they're a little overvalued right now at 9th nationally. I understand that they bring in Graham Ike and they have Watson on the low block, and this freshman is playing great in their front court as well. But I want to see what they look like in the critical moments with their guard play, having brought in, a new point guard to run the offense and some new pieces, year over year under Mark Few. It's still kind of like prove it territory for me, having them played only 2 games, 1 against Yale and then 1 against an also-ran. So I think at this point, it's probably the best you're going to get from a field that, as I mentioned at the top, has 5 AP top 15 teams. All right, who's somebody that you think is a long shot here?
Sorry, I was going to say, same with Tennessee, though. I mean, I think we still have questions about Rick Barnes' offense, even though it looks a lot better with Dalton Neck. Who knows, So, yeah, it's a good path, at least, at the minimum.
All right, in terms of a long shot, to not necessarily win it, but at least make some noise, get out of the first round, potentially give you a great hedge opportunity holding a big ticket.
Yeah, I'll go with a team that is facing Tennessee in the first round and is also picking up tempo. I like Syracuse at 50 to 1. I think they are super undervalued entering this season. We'll start with the backcourt. Judah Mintz is elite. An elite point guard, could be one of the best point guards in the nation this year. Through three
I think
games.
he's certainly the best point guard in this tournament. I think
Oh
you can
yeah,
make
for
that argument
sure.
without breaking a sweat.
Absolutely. He is like something special. Through 3 games, he has a 29% assist rate and a 9% turnover rate. That is just insanity. I love how they added JJ Starling from Notre Dame to create one of the better backcourts Cuse has had in a few years. Now they have guards that can push the pace and be more aggressive perimeter defenders. And, speaking of their defense, their man-to-man defense is just going to be better. It's the zone was not working. It was never going to work now. It's just going to be better. They're 0-3 against the spread this year, but they took on 3 mid-major teams as double-digit favorites that I'm relatively high on. New Hampshire is looking a lot better than last year. Kansas is better than last year for sure. They've already beaten St. Bonaventure, and Colgate is always a firecracker. So I think you're seeing good things from Syracuse in this early going, this like new group, this new look Syracuse team. Can they beat Tennessee? It's going to be really tough. But if they somehow do, this is where the ticket would really have value, because I think they can take on Purdue in the second round. Why? They have 7'4" redshirt junior Naheem McLeod coming in from Florida State. They also have another 7-footer on the bench and 2 other guys 6'11". They have the size to battle with Edey down low, and then the way you beat Purdue is to make the EDS beat you. And if the Cuse guards, that new backcourt, is more aggressive on the perimeter and they do pressure Smith and Lawyer, that was when Purdue got into a lot of trouble last year. So, yeah, I think Syracuse is undervalued. I mean, can they beat Tennessee? I don't know, but it's going to be a 9:30 a.m. local tip. Some weird things can happen. And I just think they're an undervalued team that shouldn't be 50 to 1. I'll probably be betting them this entire tournament. And I would love it if we can get that ticket to the championship. Presents all sorts of hedge opportunities.
I'm glad you brought up Syracuse's road so far, because I agree with you in terms of all 3 of their opponents being plus mid-majors. New Hampshire, Canisius, Colgate. The Canisius game, it was basically they were in control up, 9 to 10 points down the stretch, so they were in no risk of losing that game. And Colgate, absolutely punched them in the mouth, and they were down at halftime, and it looks like, upset was brewing in Western New York. But they go ahead and they get off the mat and they win that game against a Colgate team that, I'll have to pull up the Wikipedia. I think they've gone to the tournament, like 7 of the last 10 years out of the Patriot League. So they're a team that has a lot of experience. They don't mind mixing it up with, power programs. So I actually view that as a positive to see, their mental toughness earlier in the season.
Absolutely.
In terms of my play that I think has a little bit of value, UCLA 20 to 1. You mentioned them earlier, and I understand the issues in terms of continuity and experience in their backcourt. But Mick Cronin is a veteran coach, and he's a great game planner. And in a potential matchup in the second round, I'm not looking past that Marquette game. It's going to be difficult to win that one. But if they do, who has the best team in terms of bigs to be able to throw at Hunter Dickinson? I would argue potentially that it's, UCLA. Adem Bona only averaged 8 points per game last year, but he has looked like a reborn player thus far. He looks like the breakout player of the year in the Pac-12. I think there's an opportunity for him to average like 20 and 10 in a tournament like this. They have the Spanish import, Ade Mara, and Kenneth Nuba off the bench as well at 6'10 and 250 plus pounds. They have the bodies to throw at Dickinson to make it more difficult for him. And I agree. Then it becomes a prove it to me Kansas situation where everything that you laid out in terms of Grady Dick bailing them out in the half court last year, he's not walking through that door. So I think at 20 to 1 from a pure value perspective, that's why I like it in a game where if they were to beat Marquette, holding a 20 to 1 ticket, I'm probably going to go for a live hedge. If they can play a nice, first 5 to 8 minutes, get to that, TV timeout at the 12-minute mark with a lead, then I'll go ahead and hedge with Kansas. So that's kind of my play there. And I think when you have books offering 20 and 50 to 1 with UCLA and Syracuse respectively, you start to get into those opportunities to make money without having to win 3 in 3 days. So what do you think about the Bruins? I know that you touched on their backcourt inexperience a little bit, but do you see what I see in terms of Bona potentially taking over as somebody who has really expanded on his offensive game? It looks like he just lived in the gym over the summer.
It's nice that in a tournament that's going to be defined by 2 of the best big men in the nation in Dickinson and Edey, our sleepers are teams that have the size that can throw at the best teams in this tournament. So I think that, yeah, you're right. UCLA, I mean, they're going to need a lot from Bona in this early season tournament for that ticket to be live. But if there's going to be any guy that could really battle down low with those two, why not Adam Bona? So yeah, I like our sleepers together.
All right, for Tanner McGrath, I'm Mike Calabrese. Enjoy Feast Week, enjoy the Maui Invitational, and all that is on the gambling buffet for this week with NFL, college football, and college basketball. We'll see you guys later.